All right, now to part two of our exclusive poll results from our EWTN Real Clear Opinion research on the Catholic vote and the 2024 election. Today, we look at issues most important to the faithful from a political point of view. The number one topic, which way the faithful are set to vote in November, and right now, 50% say they plan to vote for Democrat Kamala Harris, with 43% for Republican Donald Trump. 6% of Catholic voters say they are undecided. One longtime poll watcher says the findings are surprising.
Now, if you go back and look historically, in 2016, Trump won the Catholic vote against Hillary Clinton 50-46. In 2020, he lost it to Joe Biden 52-47. So Trump went from 50% in 2016 to 47%, according to the exit polls in 2020, to now where he's at about 43.5%. So Catholics have been drifting away from Donald Trump over the last three cycles.
Tom Bevan from Real Clear Politics also weighed in on the role abortion is playing in the 2024 election. It is listed as the third most important issue for Catholics, far behind the top concern, the economy, at 51%, followed by the border at 13%.
When you look at Catholics and the abortion vote over history, Catholics have been, I think, fairly permissive on abortion in terms of, allowing abortions to be legal in some or all circumstances. Pew did a study on this back in 2019, where they found that upwards of 56% of Catholics were in favor of legalizing abortion in, most, if not all, circumstances, which is a bit surprising when you think about it. So that's part of, I think, what this poll looks to find is, Catholics on abortion. It's not a monolithic vote within the Catholic community at all.
For analysis, we turn now to Mary Rice Hasson, the Kate O'Byrne Senior Fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and Mene Ukueberuwa, member of the Wall Street Journal Editorial Board. Thank you both for being here. Really appreciate it. Mary, I want to start out with you. According to the poll, around 50% of Catholics say they plan to vote for Vice President Harris, and 43% say they're voting for former President Trump. About 6% say they're undecided on as to who to vote for. Your reaction to those numbers, and are you surprised at all?
Yeah, what surprised me was the disconnect between the low approval for President Biden, which was around 42% for Catholics, and yet the willingness to, for many of those voters who disapprove so strongly of President Biden, to cast their votes for Kamala Harris. So what it says to me is people are trusting in her promises, as opposed to being willing to make a change.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you that as a follow-up. I mean, why do you think so many Catholics are leaning towards Harris as opposed to Trump?
Yeah, you see a divide between men and women. And women have definitely cast their lot with Kamala Harris. So I think that is part of the problem, because especially among the undecided voters, they go in a big way. Women go in a big way for Kamala, and the men are breaking more towards Trump. But the margin is greater among the women going for Kamala Harris. So I think there's a lot of perhaps factual information that needs to be brought out to question the sense of whether you really can trust those promises. What is she really promising? And is that something that really aligns with our Catholic faith?
Yeah, Mene, I want to go to you next. As we mentioned, the study reveals that the number one issue here for voters is the economy. By far, about 51% saying that's the top issue. The border is next. That's coming in at about 13%. And abortion, interestingly, is third at 10%. Help us hash out these numbers. And what do you think it signals that abortion is so far down on the list at number 3 compared to the number 1 issue of the economy, especially for Catholics?
Absolutely. Well, to start with the economy, I think what you're seeing these voters respond to is these still inflated prices that they're dealing with whenever they fill up their car or go to the grocery store. Of course, first President Biden and then Kamala Harris have been running with this line that inflation is way down over the past couple of years, and that's technically true. But just because the rate of increase of prices prices has slowed down. That doesn't mean that prices have returned to where they were before the Biden presidency began. So people are still very much struggling to make their budgets balance at the end of the day. And that is a detriment to Kamala Harris, obviously, because she does belong to the Biden administration. Abortion, I think, what we're seeing is it has been returned to the center of American politics after the overturning of Roe versus Wade a couple of years ago. But I think people still are not necessarily feeling like it has a direct effect on their own personal lives in the same way that the economy and prices do. So even though Catholic voters understand that this is a moral issue and ideally should feel that they have a responsibility to elect politicians who are going to protect life, we're seeing the fact that it doesn't really have a direct effect on most people individually means that they're not putting it quite on the same tier as the economy as an issue that's going to determine their vote.
Yeah, so remember that old saying, it's the economy, stupid.
Exactly.
Right? So, Mary, I want to get back to you. 2/3 of those polled in our polling say that biological men should not be allowed to compete in women's sports, with only about 18% saying that they should be permitted. How do these numbers compare on a national average? And why do you think there's such a strong consensus here?
I think that tracks pretty well with where the general public is. And I think the reason is because people can see that these are men who are participating in women's sports. And the question was asked very much, along those lines, very factual. Should males be allowed to participate in women's sports? So people can see what's happening, and they can also see the harm. They have an intuitive sense. We saw it in the Olympics with the boxers. We've seen it in discussions with Riley Gaines highlighting what happened in the swimming world. People can see that it's unfair. And so, and there's been a lot of messaging around it. So I think those combinations of things, you can see it, there's harm, and we've heard a lot about it.
Yeah. And this polling, we asked a variety of questions. Another question that we asked Catholics was, what do they think about foreign relations? They seem to be divided, Mene, when it comes to the war between Israel and Hamas. 41% say Israel's response to the October 7th terror attack is somewhat or completely acceptable, while 39% say the response is somewhat or completely unacceptable. What's your takeaway from this? And do you think that that issue is enough to sway people's votes towards one candidate or another?
Well, it's an interesting poll because historically, Christians, including Catholics in the United States, have felt a strong affinity for the state of Israel and for the Jewish people. And you'd think that a majority would be exercised wanting the United States to robustly support them against Islamic terrorism. And yet we are seeing a pretty clear divide. And I think it's like many other issues where Catholics reflect America, essentially. Catholics who are liberally inclined are going to take the Democratic position on this issue, which is that Israel has overstepped. Catholics who are more conservatively inclined tend to support Trump's standpoint, which is that Israel needs a robust defense. And so I think the way that it could really play in the election result is if people feel that Kamala Harris isn't prepared enough, that she doesn't have executive experience, which Trump, for all of his flaws, does have. And we did see him managing the Middle East fairly well during his 4 years in office.
Hey, Mary, I want to go back to you. Another question on the transgender issue here. 50% of our respondents say that they don't support puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgical procedures for minors, while 14% say that they actually support puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, while about 22% say they're unsure about those things. Your thoughts on that, those results, and which way do you see things trending on this issue?
Yeah, so I was a little disappointed in those results, to tell you the truth, because we are seeing in other polls that people are catching on to the fact that there's a lot of harm when you allow minors to undergo medical and surgical procedures based on an inner feeling. So I was disappointed to see the Catholic totals so low. And when I looked at the crosstabs, I noticed that women in particular, as well as Hispanic voters, if you add up those who approve of these, as well as those who are undecided, they outweigh, or more of them are saying that than are saying that they oppose it, which says to me there's a high rate of undecideds here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for being here and for your analysis. We really appreciate it. God bless you both.
Thank you.